So hello and welcome back to Go Again Gaming. My name is Az and today it's another MTG Spotlight video for you, and this is going to be focused on Volo Guide to Monsters. And this is a brand new card from Adventures in the Forgotten Realms, and this is going to be a sort of janky, Timmy, big creatures, non-creature tribal. It's going to be a stupid sort of guide to how to build this deck, and I'm just going to be throwing ideas at you based on the different sort of monsters in the Magic the Gathering universe. So this deck is going to be very, very janky, very, very Timmy-esque, and it's not going to feature any legendary creatures. It's only going to be big creatures with not legendary creatures, and it's not going to include like humanoids either. It's not going to include elves, humans. It's not going to include any of those tribes. It's just going to be big, dumb monsters, which is how I would build this deck if I had the opportunity to. And you might see that in the future. Who knows? But yeah, this is AZZ'S Guide to Monsters, a Volo EDH guide. So first of all, we want to know what Volo himself does. So Volo is a legendary creature, human wizard. It costs 2 generic green and blue for a 3/2, and it says whenever you cast a creature spell that doesn't share a creature type with a creature you control or a creature card in your graveyard, copy that spell, and obviously that copy of a creature becomes a token. So every single creature that you play in this deck will basically become a copy of itself, because you're not going to have another tribe that shares a tribe with that creature in the deck. You're just going to have one-ofs in every single category, and that will make it hard to choose what sort of beast or avatar or cat or chimera that you have in the deck. But hopefully this video guides you as to what you want to have in that deck. So first of all, we're going to go in alphabetical order. So first on the list is avatars. So avatars are like god-like idol figures. It's hard to explain what an avatar is. So the first one is a card called Diluvian Primordial. So if you look on the art there, it's like some sort of weird sort of avatar god spiritual type character. But yeah, blue and 5 for a 5/5 flying avatar. And when it enters the battlefield, for each opponent you may cast up to 1 target instant or sorcery card from that player's graveyard without paying its mana cost. And if that spell will be cast this way, put it into a graveyard, or if it be put into a graveyard this turn, exile it instead. So if you have Volo out and you cast this, you're going to be making 2 of these things, which not only gets you 2 5/5 flying bodies, but you also then get to cast, for each opponent you may cast up to 1 target instant or sorcery. So you get basically 6 spells off of this. So for each opponent you may cast up to 1 target instant or sorcery from that player's graveyard without paying its mana cost. So you could potentially, with this card being played because of Volo, you're going to get 2 copies of this. You get 2 enter the battlefield triggers, which means that you're going to be able to copy them out 6 spells off of Diluvian Primordial. So I thought this was a fantastic include for the avatar section. So this is probably the only avatar you should probably include in there. If I'm wrong and I've missed an avatar, then definitely leave a comment in the section below. So the next creatures on the list are basilisks. So basilisks are like sort of lizard creatures that ultimately kill things by looking at them. And the include that I want to include in this particular build is an old classic of mine that I used to play all the time back in sort of early 2000s, and this is Stone Tongue Basilisk from Odyssey. Yeah, it costs green and 4 for a 4/5. Absolutely ridiculous mana cost these days for what it is. And it says whenever Stone Tongue Basilisk deals combat damage to a creature, destroy that creature at the end of combat. So it's a 4/5 death touching basilisk for 7 mana. Basically, so it's quite high costed, but I just do love the threshold ability on this as well. So if you have threshold enabled, all creatures able to block the Stone Tongue Basilisk do so. So again, with Volo, if you cast this, you're going to get 2 of these things, which are big 4/5 death touchers, basically, which will have an inbuilt lure effect if you do have a full graveyard. So I thought that would be a good basilisk inclusion if you do want to include the basilisks. The next beast in the bestiary is in fact Beast. Now there are a load of brilliant beasts that you can include on this on this list, so it would be hard to choose out of these particular beasts. So the first one is Cragplate Baloth. Again, you want to be running probably one of the beasts in the deck. You don't want to be running multiple creatures because then it will just counteract Volo's strategy. But one of these called Cragplate Baloth. Green, green, and 5 for a beast. It's a 6/6 hexproof haste, can't be countered, and if it was kicked, it enters a battlefield with 4 +1/+1 counters on it. So yeah, it's a pretty big, beefy beta with hexproof and haste. So making 2 of these for the 7 mana could be quite good. The next one we have is obviously Craterhoof Behemoth. So obviously it's just an absolute classic, isn't it? It's a beast, and obviously if you copy it, you're going to get the trigger double times. So yeah, I'm sure you know what Craterhoof is. Green, 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 and 5 for a 5/5 haste beast. When it enters, creatures you control get +X/+X and end of turn, where X is number of creatures you control. So if you make 2 of these with Volo, you're going to be getting that ability twice, which is pretty ridiculous, and it's going to be a massive game ender. You know, it's a game ender in itself anyway, let alone if you double it up. So yeah, Craterhoof, another good selection for a beast. The next good selection for a beast is Elder Gargaroth. So this is probably one of the most valuable beasts you could potentially have and copy with Volo. Green, green, and 3 for a 6/6 Vigilance Reach Trample. Whenever it attacks or blocks, choose 1, you get another beast, you gain 3 life, or you draw a card. So if you have 2 of these out because of Volo, whenever they attack or block, you're going to get an additional thing. So that is very, very good in the deck. A very, very valuable beast to have. The next one I saw was a card called Colonian Behemoth. So this is quite a big creature. So Colonian Behemoth is a 9/9 Shroud for 7 mana. So green, green, and 5 for a 9/9 with Shroud. So you're getting 18 power on the board with Volo, and both of those creatures cannot be the target of spells or abilities. So they are quite hard to remove, although they do not have trample, which is a bit of a shame. The next we have beast is Manglehorn. When it enters the battlefield, you may destroy target artifact, and then artifacts your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped. So if you want to, use your beast category as a removal spell, you could potentially put Manglehorn in here to get rid of artifacts and just, jam up artifact strategies, which is quite good. Next we have a Phyrexian Ingester. So this is a beast, but I don't know whether this has been errated to a Phyrexian or not. Really, I'm just typing it in Scryfall as we go through this, but it hasn't. No, it has. It's been errated to a Phyrexian beast. So you could have this in your Phyrexian/beast slot. Yeah, it's a removal spell basically. So 1 blue, 6 for a beast. 3/3. It's imprint. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile target non-token creature. And then it gets +X/+Y, where X is the exiled creature's power and Y is its toughness. So again, just a removal spell in the beast category. And obviously in this deck, you're probably not going to be having really not many spells. You're going to be having a lot of creatures that do the spells for you, basically. So you can double up on the ETB triggers or double up on the attacks or blocks or whatever you have them do, basically. Next we have Rampaging Baloths. So this is a good way of generating a lot of tokens, because obviously if you get 2 of these out because of Volo, every land drop's then going to turn into another, turn into 2 4/4 beasts as a result of the Rampaging Baloths. So that could be a very, very good include for token generation. Then we've got Siege Behemoth, which is a great card for just getting through some damage. This is green, green, and 5 for a 7/4 beast with hexproof, and as long as it's attacking, for each creature you control, you may have that creature assign its combat damage as though it weren't blocked, which is great for just basically making all of your creatures unblockable, which is fantastic. We've got another Behemoth in here, that is Spearbreaker. So Spearbreaker Behemoth is another great card. It's green, green, and 5 for a creature beast 5/5 of indestructible, and you can pay 1 mana without tapping it, so you can pump as much mana as you want into this. Target creature with power 5 or greater is indestructible this turn. So you can basically give all of your creatures indestructible, because a lot of your creatures in this deck will be massive power. So yeah, that's very, very good. We've also got another off-the-wall sort of choice here in the beast, and that is Spinebiter. So this is green, green, and 4 for a 3/4 of infect, and it says you may have Spinebiter assign its combat damage as though it weren't blocked. So if you make 2 of these things, next turn you're going to be able to get in 6 infect damage, which is going to be quite detrimental to the game of who you're attacking. So that's quite good. Another sort of off-the-wall strategy, you could potentially throw some infectors in here, which could be a strategy that nobody sees coming. And then finally, the other beast in the deck, which I think would be very, very good as well, would be Thunderfoot Baloth, which is a great card, which synergizes with, obviously, if you have your commander out. So this is a green, and 4 for a beast. It's a 5/5 with trample, and as long as you control your commander, Thunderfoot Baloth gets +2/+2, and other creatures you control have +2/+2 and have trample. So if you have 2 of these out, the Baloth will get +2/+2, and then all of your creatures will have +4/+4. So yeah, that's a pretty good thing. Pretty big, sort of go wide strategy with lots and lots of creatures. So I think that could be quite good as well. But if I was to choose one out of this list, it would probably be the Elder Gargaroth, just because of the sheer amount of value that it gives you. It can draw you cards, it can gain you life, and it can also has token generation on there. And it's probably one of the most cheaper costed beasts. So if I could choose one, it would probably be the Elder Gargaroth that takes that slot. Now the next we have are cats. Now the only cat I could find that would be of any sort of mention here is Keeper of Fables. So this is a green card. So this costs green, and 3 for a 4/5 cat. And it says whenever one or more non-human creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. So it's a nice little sort of big creature that cares about damage going through to your opponents and then drawing cards. So if you've got 2 of these as a result of Volo, then obviously that's going to trigger twice, which is pretty good. So Keeper of Fables, the only cat worth mentioning. Next we have Chimeras. Now there's 2 Chimeras that I wanted to mention in this video. The first one is the standard Chimera, and that is Tree Shaker Chimera. So this is green, and 5 for a Chimera. It's an 8/5, and it says all creatures able to block it do so. So that's quite cool. And then when it dies, you draw 3 cards. So if you make 2 of these things, you've got a potential then to draw 6 cards off of the back of their deaths. And it's also could be a removal spell, because you're making an 8/5. You're making things block an 8/5, which is most of the time going to take down most things. And then when it dies, you draw 3 cards. But it does seem like just a big removal spell, really, and a card draw spell on a body. So I think having 2 of these would be quite good, and you can obviously choose your attacks wisely, and obviously when they die, whether that's to a removal spell, board wipe, or combat, you get to draw 3 cards off of the back of it. So I think having 2 of these as a result of Volo would be quite good. But I think the Chimera that does take the cake is Apex Devastator. So this is a new card. It is actually a hybrid creature, but there aren't any other Hydras in this deck worth mentioning, because they all enter with counters, and this doesn't care about counters. So Apex Devastated would also take the Chimera slot, in the sense that it's Chimera Hydra, but it is absolutely ridiculous. If you get 2 of these things, it's game over time, I think. So green, and 8 for a Chimera Hydra, a 10/10 with Cascade. So if you get 2 of these things, you're going to cascade 4 times twice, which is absolutely outrageous. So if you can get that going with Volo, I think that's definitely the Chimera choice that you need to consider as the Chimera strategy, or the Chimera slot in the deck. The next we have are the Dinosaurs. Now the Dinosaurs are big, massive lizards, and they tend to be quite scary. So the first one is Apex Altazor. This is green, and 7 for a 10/10, and when it enters the battlefield, it fights up to 1 target creature you don't control, and it has Enrage. So obviously when it is dealt damage, it has an Enrage trigger, and then it fights another target creature you don't control. So again, it's a big removal spell, but if you have 2 of these, it's going to potentially clear the board of all those problematic creatures, and potentially even the big creatures as well, because it can deal 10 damage to something every time it fights. So yeah, it could be seen as a board wipe in the deck, potentially, but again, all the good stuff in this deck is attached to a big, massive creature that looks cool. So yeah, Apex Altazor is a good pick for Dinosaur. But the next one is Carnage Tyrant. Just so much mana. So much value for the mana. This is a 7/6 trample hexproof, cannot be countered, and it's green, and 4. So if you get 2 of these out, you got some big savage beaters there for the mana that you pay into it. Next we've got Regal Behemoth. So this is a dinosaur, and this is this is a lizard. but it's been errated to dinosaur as a result of the fact when it was printed back in Conspiracy, but it's now a dinosaur. So yeah, green, and 4 for a dinosaur. It's a 5/5 with trample. When it enters, you become the monarch, so that's great. And then whenever you tap a land for mana while you're the monarch, you add 1 mana of any colour to your mana pool. So if you have 2 of these out, you're going to be adding 3 mana every time you tap a land. You're going to be adding 2 extra mana, which is going to be ridiculous. So it basically acts like a Zendikar Resurgent on a body. And obviously with Monarch as well, if you're the Monarch at the end step, you draw an additional card, which is always good in these sorts of big creature decks. Next we have Ripjaw Raptor. So this is quite a good card for drawing cards again. So green, and 2 for a little dinosaur with Enrage, and whenever it's dealt damage, draw a card. So again, if you have 2 of these out as a result of Volo, you're going to be drawing quite a lot of cards from this. So it could be a good little cheap dinosaur include if you just want to care about, you know, getting more cards. The next we have another dinosaur called Thrashing Brontodon, which is just a great removal spell on a body. So green, and 1 for a 3/4 dinosaur, and you can pay 1 and sack it to destroy target artifact or enchantments. With Volo, you get 2 of these, 2 removal spells on bodies, and they're quite beefy as well. So yeah, they could even do damage to people. So yeah, Thrashing Brontodon had to be mentioned. And then we've also got, lastly, Wayward Swordtooth as a potential ramp spell in the deck. So this costs 1 green and 2 others for a dinosaur. Has Ascend, so as long as you control 10 or more permanents, you get the City's Blessing, and it simply says you may play additional land on each of your turns, and then Wayward Swordtooth can't attack or block unless you have the City's Blessing. But if you have Volo and you cast Wayward Swordtooth, you get another Wayward Swordtooth, which means you can play 2 additional lands on each of your turns then, which is probably going to activate them, so they're probably going to become 5/5 dinosaurs quite quickly, which is always good. So yeah, Wayward Swordtooth is another great include. I think for the dinosaur selection there, I'd probably choose Wayward Swordtooth or Carnage Tyrant. So next we have dragons. Now dragons in blue and green, you don't really have that much selection. I mean, you do nowadays with obviously the Dungeons and Dragons set, but as I mentioned, this video doesn't include any legendary creatures because they'll just have to be sacrificed if you don't run things like Mirror Gallery and Sakashima and what have you. So this is just again a jank list. So the dragon I've included on here is Destructor Dragon. Green, and 4 for a 4/4 flying, and when it dies you destroy target non-creature permanent. So if you get 2 4/4 flyers for 6 that when they die they destroy things, I think that's a good rate in this deck. So yeah, Destructor Dragon is the dragon of choice on this list. Next we have the Drakes. Now there's 2 Drakes I thought would be worth mentioning. So the first one is Loyal Drake, which has Lieutenant ability. So this is a Drake, which is a 2/2 flyer for 1 blue and 2 others, and it says at the beginning of your combat on your turn, if you control your commander, draw a card. So if you have 2 of these out and you control your commander, you're basically drawing 2 cards at the start of combat, which I think is very, very good. So it had to be mentioned here. That's Loyal Drake. And the second Drake on the list is Angler Drake. So this had to be mentioned because it's just a cool little Drake that does something. So it's a 4/4 flyer, costs blue, and 4. When it enters the battlefield, you may return target creature to its owner's hand. So you play this, you copy it because of Volo, and you return 2 creatures to their owner's hands, which could also open up a big attack, and so it can count as a removal spell in the Drake category of your deck. The next we have is a Druid. Now a Druid is sort of a humanoid-esque creature, but I thought this would be good to include in there, and that is Harvester Druid. So this is a human druid. It's a 1/1. It costs 1 green and 1 other, and it says tap to add to your mana pool 1 mana of any colour that a land you could control could produce. So again, just a bit of a mana dork on a body. And again, you could probably include things like elves and other stuff that also care about adding mana, but I'm not going to include too many of those on this video. I just thought a druid was a good shout to do. So next we have the Dryads. So first of all we have Bramble Sovereign. So Bramble Sovereign is a Dryad. It's a 4/4 from Battle Bond, costs green, and 2 for a Dryad, and it says whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield, you may pay 1 green and 1 other. If you do, that creature's controller creates a token that's a copy of that creature. So this works with if you're playing a creature out of your deck and you've got Volo out, you're going to copy it from Volo, but if you want to pay an additional green and 1, you can also copy that with Bramble Sovereign as well. which is pretty good. So you're just getting more and more sort of Volo-esque sort of style abilities with the Bramble Sovereign, which I think is very, very good. The next Dryad is Dryad of the Elysian Grove. So this is just a great ramp spell, really. So again, you could look at the Dryad section to sort of source your ramp. It is a Nymph Dryad, but it is still a Dryad. So I think it's been errated actually looking at the Scryfall. But yeah, it's a 2/4. You can play additional land on each of your turns, and then lands you control are every basic land type in addition to their other types. It costs 1 green and 2. So if you have 2 of these out, you're going to be, again, being able to play 2 additional lands on each of your turns is just a fantastic way of ripping out and getting out all of your land drops, which I think is fantastic. Next we have the Eldrazi section. So Eldrazi, big massive alien creatures which deal all sorts of damage. So the first one we have is Bane of Balaged. So this is a 7/5 for 7 mana Eldrazi. When it attacks, defending player exiles 2 permanents he or she controls. So yeah, a fantastic card to get. If you get double value from this because of the Volo, you're going to be ripping away people's battlefields, which is absolutely fantastic. So Bane of Balaged. We've also got Breaker of Armies, which I think is a cool card. So this is a 10/8 for 8 mana. And it says all creatures able to block Breaker of Armies do so. You know, it's again could be classed as a board wipe because of the fact that everything has to block it that you attack. And again, it's a selective board wipe. You don't have to kill everyone's creatures. You can only kill the creatures that you attack. So all creatures able to block it do so. And having 2 of these out as a result of Volo, again, is like a one-sided board wipe. A very, very expensive one, but a TIMMY one nonetheless. If you have the money to spend, It That Betrays is absolutely ridiculous. It That Betrays is an 11/11 Annihilator 2 for 12 mana. And it says whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent, put that card onto battlefield under your control. So, you know, having 2 of these out as a result of Volo is just game over time, I think. And then finally we've got another include, and that's Ulamog's Crusher, which is just a big beater. It's an 8/8 for 8 mana. It's got Annihilator 2 and it attacks each combat if able. So having 2 of these out, again, it's just complete and utter aggro and just ripping apart someone's board state. So Eldrazi, absolutely fantastic. But the one I would probably choose, probably Bane of Balaged, because it's cheaper, it exiles things, and I think that would probably be the best one. We'll see, but leave your comment in the section below as to which one you would choose if you only could choose one. And I think you should only choose one because of the fact that it's non-tribal, basically. So next we've got some elementals on the list. Now the first one is Aether Snipe. So this is a nice little elemental. Is a 4/4 elemental. It costs 1 blue and 5 others, and when it enters the battlefield, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand, but you can also evoke it for blue, blue and 1. So if you want to use your elemental slot for removal, this is probably the best way to do it. Aether Snipe, returning a non-land permanent to its owner's hand, and you've got 4/4 body attached to it. But again, because of the Volo trigger, you're going to have 2 of these, which are going to return 2 things to their owner's hand. So yeah, double value on the ETB triggers there, of course. Next we have a ridiculous card, and that is Avenger of Zendikar. Probably a classic at this point. Green, green and 5 for a 5/5 elemental. When it enters, you get a 0/1 green plant for each land you control, and then whenever a land enters, you get a +1/+1 on each plant you control. So, you know, Volo making 2 of these will create you a massive instant board state. I mean, there are other creatures in these lists that will obviously create you tokens as well, but this is probably one of the classic ones, which is just going to give you a swath of creatures, and it is going to grow them over time. So yeah, a solid include for the elemental slot. Next we have Fertilid. So this is a good little card for the ramp slot if you want to use your elemental as a ramp. So this is green and 2 for an elemental which enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it, and you can pay a green and 1 and remove a counter from it, and you can search live for a basic land, put on battlefield tapped, and shuffle your library. So you can use that as a ramp card for Fertilid. Next we have Forgotten Ancient. So this is quite a good card for just buffing up your creatures, making your creatures massive, and just distributing counters. So if you've got a counter strategy in your deck somewhere, you can use this for that advantage. So yeah, it's 0/3 elemental, green and 3 to cast. Whenever a player casts a spell, you may put a +1/+1 counter on Forgotten Ancient. So yeah, that's going to get big quite quickly. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may move any number of +1/+1 counters from Forgotten Ancient onto other creatures. So again, just going to pump your team quite massively. And if you have 2 of those out, it's going to be doing that even more so. So if I've got an Ancient, thought I'd worth include. Next, you've got Mole Drifter. So if you want to use your elemental slot for drawing cards, this is probably the way to do it. Mole Drifter is a 2/2 with flying, costs 1 blue and 4 others, and when it enters you draw 2 cards. So with Volo out you draw 4 cards, and obviously you can evoke it for 1 blue and 2 others if you do not want to cast it for its full cost. So yeah, Mole Drifter, a good way of drawing cards in the elemental slot. Next we have Nyx Bloom Ancient, which is pretty ridiculous. So this is a massive swingy card. So it's an enchantment creature elemental, green, 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 and 4 for a 5/5 trample. And if you tap a permanent for mana, it produces 3 times as much of that mana instead. So yeah, that is going to be ridiculous. I don't even know how these would stack. After looking at the rules and the footage, I can confirm that they do indeed stack. So 9 times the amount of mana. But it's just a worthy include, so it's a ridiculous card. And then we have Regal Force, which is a cool little card. A green, 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 and 4 for a 5/5. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card for each green creature you control. So it could be a absolutely massive card draw spell, and you get a 5/5 body at the end of it, but you get that twice as a result of Volo potentially, so it could be very, very massive green spell which draws you cards and gets you 10 power on board. So yeah, Regal Force, very, very good. And then we have Royal Elemental. So a bit of an off-the-wall choice here for elemental slot. This is a 3/2 with flying. It costs blue, 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 and 3, but it has a landfall trigger. So whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may gain control of a type creature for as long as you control Royal Elemental. So if you have 2 of these out, every time a land enters, you're going to be able to steal 2 creatures, which is pretty ridiculous. So yeah, definitely worth an include on there. And then we got another cool card, one I used to play with a lot when I was younger, and that is Tornado Elemental. This is green, green, and 5 for a 6/6, and when it enters the battlefield, does 6 damage to each creature with flying. So obviously 2 Tornado Elementals come in, you do 12 damage to each creature with flying, which is pretty ridiculous in the grand scheme of things. And then you may have the Tornado Elementals assign their combat damage as though they weren't blocked. Which is always good. So you have 2 of these out, you've got 12 damage on board that you can attack someone next turn with. I think that's pretty good. And no matter what blockers they have out, you can still allocate that damage as though it were not blocked. And then we have, finally, we have Void Stalker as well. So this is another elemental. Which is a blue and 1 for a 2/1, and it says pay blue and 2 and tap and put Void Stalker and target creature on top of their owner's libraries, then those players shuffle their libraries. So just a great way of removing a creature basically from the game until further notice, unless they get lucky. Now again, you could go anywhere with the elementals. You've got removal there, you've got mana doubling or tripling, you've got card draw, you've got token generation. So it really just boils down to what sort of strategy you want to have in your deck in the elemental section, because they're all very, very varied. So yeah, what's your pick? What elemental would you choose? Next we have the elephants of the deck. So we've got 2 elephants we can choose from. We've got Terastodon, which is absolutely outrageous. This is green, green, and 6 for a 9/9 elephant, and when it enters the battlefield, you may destroy up to 3 target non-creature permanents, and then for each permanent put into a graveyard this way, its controller gets a 3/3 green elephant creature token. So if you cast this with Volo out, you're going to get 2 Terastodons, so you're going to get 2 9/9s, which then can blow up 6 non-creature permanents. So you could blow up 6 lands if you wanted to, which is absolutely horrendous. And exactly why it needs to go in the deck as an elephant. But just as another alternative, you do have, of course, the Battle Mammoth from Kaldheim, which came out recently. So this is quite cool as well for value. So it's a 6/5 with trample, cost green, green, and 3. And it says whenever a permanent you control becomes the target of a spell or ability an opponent controls, you may draw a card. So yeah, it protects your stuff from removal because you get to obviously cash in a card as a result of that. But you can also foretell it as well if you do want to do that. So yeah, I just thought another worthy include, as it's an elephant, would be Battle Mammoth. The next category is giants. We've only got 1 giant in this sort of section, and that is Beanstalk Giants. It's one of the only green giants you can have. So yeah, green and 6 for a giant. It's power and toughness, each equals number of lands you control, but it does also have a ramp spell on there as well. Fertile Footsteps, green and 2. You can search line for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield and shuffle your library. So yeah, it's a fantastic sort of slot for a ramp spell, being the only giant in the deck, which then cares about the amount of lands you have later. So yeah, definitely a good include for the giant section. Next we have the horror section, and again, horrors aren't really green and blue, but there is one that stands out, and that is Mercfiend Liege, which is a 4/4 horror. It's 2 generic mana and then green blue, green blue, green blue, so any of the above. And it says other green creatures you control get +1/+1, other blue creatures you control get +1/+1. So it buffs your entire team. And it says untap all green and or blue creatures you control during each other player's untap step. So it's like a Seedborn Muse type of effect for your creatures, which could be quite good. So yeah, definitely worth a mention for the horror section of the bestiary. Next we have insects, one of my favourite cards, or my favourite creature types, and yeah, we get to choose from 3 awesome cards here. So first of all we have Giant Adderphage. So this is a massive creature that I absolutely love, and it has absolutely wreaked havoc in games in the past. So green, green and 5 for an insect, a 7/7 trample, and when it deals combat damage to a player, create a token that's a copy of Giant Adderphage. So if you've got Volo out, you're obviously going to be creating 2 of these, so when they deal damage they multiply and multiply and multiply. So yeah, having 2 of these off of the bat that double themselves every time they deal damage, which is very, very likely because they're 7/7 tramples, is a very, very good include, and they're big, massive insect beaters. Speaking of insect beaters, we have Vorapede, a great card just as a beater. It's a 5/4 vigilance trample, undying, costs green, green, green and 2. So yeah, you play 2 of these for 5 mana, they're not going to go away anytime soon. They're just going to keep coming in at you because they're vigilance and trample and undying. So yeah, I just thought I'd throw one of my favourite cards of all time in there. And of course we have a massive token generator in Hornet Queen as well. So green, green, green and 4 for an insect, 2/2 flying, death touch, and when it enters you create 4 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and death touch. So if you have Volo out, you're going to get 2 of these, which then creates 8 other 1/1 flying death touch. So you're going to have 10 creatures with flying and death touch. So I think that's very, very good value. I think if I'd have to choose one of these, it would be between Hornet Queen and Giant Adderphage. I think with Hornet Queen coming in at the top because of the sheer value that you get from having 2 of them. But again, Giant Adderphage could also be very, very good as well because it can get out of hand very, very quickly, and they're larger bodies. So yeah, take your pick. The next creature type we have is Kraken. Now, Krakens, a lot of them do care about islands and all that sort of stuff. So the only one that doesn't really care about all that sort of stuff is Storm Surge Kraken. So this is a 5/5 with hexproof. It costs blue, blue and 3 to summon. So as long as you control your commander, it gets +2/+2 and has whenever it becomes blocked, you may draw 2 cards. So yeah, I think this is a great Kraken slot because obviously it basically reads. You get 2 7/7 hexproofs with when they become blocked you draw 2 cards. I think that's insane value for the 5 mana that you pay when Volo's out to get that. I think is really, really good. So yeah, Storm Surge Kraken, the honourable Kraken of the deck. Next we have Leviathan. So there's 2 mentions for this. First of all we have Simic Sky Swallower, will just be a massive beater in the deck. So this is a 6/6 flying trample shroud for 7 mana, green, blue and 5. And yeah, you pay 7 mana to get 2 6/6 flying trample shrouds. I think that's a good rate in this deck. So yeah, definitely a worthy contender. But then we also have Stormtide Leviathan as well, which is basically a stacks piece for a deck like this. So blue, blue, blue and 5 for an 8/8 island walk. And it says all lands are islands in addition to their other types, so you can go down that unblockable strategy route. And it says creatures without flying or island walk can't attack, which is a bit annoying sometimes because you don't see a lot of creatures with flying or island walk in these sorts of decks. But because when you have Volo out, you're going to be getting 2 of these, you're going to have 16 power on board that cannot be blocked because everything is an island, which is quite scary. Hence why it's in there. So yeah, I think I'd probably choose Stormtide Leviathan over the Simic Sky Swallower just because of the potential that Stormtide Leviathan has to lock out games and deal unblockable damage. So yeah, Stormtide Leviathan Very, very good. Next we have the Octopus of the deck. But yeah, Mesmerizing Venthid is a great Octopus include. Blue, blue, and 3 for a 4/5. When it enters the battlefield, you create 2/0/2 blue illusion creature tokens with whenever this creature blocks, that creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap steps. That's a good way of sort of icing down some attacking creatures and giving yourself some defense and also some token board state. And obviously the Octopus itself has hexproof as long as you control one of those illusions. So, you know, you play this when Volo's out, you get 3 creatures plus the additional Mesmerizing Venthid, which then gives you 3 creatures because of the Octopus and because of the 2 illusions that it brings with it. So yeah, I think that's a great card in this deck defensively, and it's just a big beater as well, potentially, a big Octopus. Next we have the plant of the deck, and this is Elysian Carotid. So this is the only plant I thought would be worth putting in here. So green and 1 for a 1/1, and it says tap to add 1 mana of any colour, and if you control a creature with power 4 or greater, add 2 mana of any 1 colour instead. So yeah, basically you are going to control a creature with power 4 or greater in this deck, so it's going to tap to add 2 mana, and it's the only plant of the deck which I thought would be worth putting in there. Next we have Rhino. So the Rhino card in here is Loyal Guardian, another creature that cares about your sort of commander being out. So this is a 4/4 trample, and it costs green and 4, and it says Lieutenant. So as long as you control your commander at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control your commander, put +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So yeah, a massive way of pumping your entire team by having your commander out, which I think is very, very good. So yeah, worth an include for the Rhino section if you want to have some sort of you know, buff the team type of effect. Rhino can do that for you. Next we have Salamander. Now this wasn't really brought to light until Commander Legends, and this is a fantastic card in this deck, and that's Amphin Mutineer, which is a new card. So this is a Salamander Pirate. Luckily we don't have any other pirates in the deck, so we don't have to worry about that. But blue and 3 for a Salamander Pirate. When it enters the battlefield, exile up to 1 target non-Salamander creature. That creature's controller creates a 4/3 blue Salamander Warrior creature token. So yeah, you play this, you have your commander out, you get 2 of these, you can exile 2 creatures, which is ridiculous. And of course, you have the Encore effect on there as well, which can also prove very, very handy later on, which is great. So a great Salamander include for removal. Next we have on the list is Serpents. Now, there is one big daddy serpent that was released recently, but of course it's legendary, so you can't include it. So I would just mention one of my old favourites, and that is Sliptide Serpent, which I think is just a brilliant card. And in this deck, it can just pretty much go infinite if you have enough mana to do so. So you got blue and 4 for a 4/4 Serpent. And you can pay blue and 3 to return the Sliptide Serpent to its owner's hand. So if you can some way make infinite mana, you can play the Sliptide Serpent, you can get a copy of it, you can then return the original copy to your hand, play it again, and get infinite Serpents as a result. If you have infinite blue mana, you will get infinite Sliptide Serpents from Volo. So yeah, if you've got a way of making infinite blue mana, drop it in the comments section below. I'd love to know what it is, because I'd love to win with this janky combo. Infinite Sliptide Serpents. Hashtag infinite serpents in the comments. After the serpents, we have the snakes. Now, there's only one good snake in the deck that I thought I would put in there, or consider to be put in there. Not all of these creatures could go in there, of course, because we already got limited cards. But the snake that I thought would be absolutely fantastic in this deck would be Hex Drinker, which is a 1-drop snake. It's a green snake with a level up mechanic. So you can put a level 1, you can put a level up counter on it for 1 mana. As soon as it becomes level 3 to 7, it's a 4/4 protection from instants, and as soon as it becomes level 8 and above, it's a 6/6 protection from everything. So again, going down that unblockable route of just having an absolute massive creature that cannot be blocked by anything. Hex Drinker, if you have 2 of these out and you've got the mana to pump into them, your opponents are going to have to sort of watch out for it, because it's very, very powerful if it's allowed to get to that level 8 status. Next we have SPHINXS. Now there's loads of SPHINXS out there, but I thought this one would be probably the best one, and that is Sphinx Ambassador. So this is blue and 5 for a 5/5 flying Sphinx from M10, so very, very old. And when it deals combat damage to a player, search that player's library for a card, then that player names a card. If you search for a creature card that isn't the name card, you may put it onto the battlefield under your control, then that player shuffles his or her library, which I think is just absolutely outrageous. It really is. especially in my sort of meta where you've got players that are running some massive creatures in their decks, and the likelihood is they're not going to guess the one that you want to get. And having 2 of these out, 2 5/5 flyers that can potentially fetch any creature out of your opponent's deck, is absolutely outrageous. So definitely worth the include for the Sphinx section. So that's Sphinx Ambassador. Now, one of my favourite creature types, and that is Spider. I only have 3 sort of selections for this because spiders, unfortunately, all the good ones are legendary. So we got the 2 recluses. We've got Deadly Recluse and Kessig Recluse. So Deadly Recluse is obviously the spider that costs 1 green and 1 other for a 1/2 reach Death Touch. So paying 2 mana for 2 1/2 reach Death Touch with Volo out, I think that's quite good. And similar to that, we have the Kessig Recluse, which is a 2/3 reach Death Touch for 2 green and 2 others. So again, getting 2 2/3 reach Death Touches for 4 mana with Volo out is quite good. But I think because I'm a massive Timmy, I would choose the Sky Snare Spider over the other ones because the art just looks absolutely ridiculously good. So yeah, Sky Snare Spider is green, green and 4 for a 6/6 Vigilance Reach. So yeah, you pay 6 mana with Volo out, you get 2 6/6 Vigilance Reaches. And yeah, that's probably the card I would choose, just because I love Sky Snare Spider, and I don't think I'd play it in any other deck apart from this one. So yeah. We have on the list next, we have Trolls. So we've got 2 Trolls that made this list. First of all, we have Mossbridge Troll, which is absolutely ridiculous. So Mossbridge Troll is a 5/5. It costs green, green and 5, and it says if Mossbridge Troll will be destroyed, instead regenerate it. Well, not instead, but just regenerate it. So built-in protection, which is great. And it says tap any number of untapped creatures you control other than Mossbridge Troll with total power 10 or greater, which will be easily achieved in this sort of deck. And then it gets +20/+20 until the end of turn. So it just casually becomes a 25/25 creature if you tap 10 creatures. Creatures with power 10 or greater other than Mossbridge Troll. So having 2 of these out, it's not only going to fuel its own ability, but have the ability to potentially hit someone for 50 if you can tap enough creatures with both Trolls. So yeah, very deadly Mossbridge Troll. And the other troll worth mentioning is Trolls of Tel Jalad, which I just thought I'd chuck this in here because it's just a bit of a nostalgia feel for me. So yeah, green, green and 5 for a 5/6 troll, which says 1 green and 1 other, regenerate target green creature. So it's like a built-in bit of protection for your creatures, and it's a big beater in itself, and you're going to have, of course, 2 of these because it's a creature. That's what I like about this deck, is that you've got your sort of normal abilities that you normally seek for, but they're all attached to bodies, which I think is quite interesting. So hence why I'm speaking about this deck today, because it's really cool. And finally, the last creature type in the list. I'm probably missing a few of your favourite creature types, but these are my favourite ones that I thought would be worth mentioning, and they are probably the most monstrous creature types out there. But the last one we have is Worms, and that is Worm spelled W-U-R-M, so Worm. It's the classic Worm. So first of all, we have Argothian Worm. So Argothian Worm is a 6/6 trample. It costs 1 green and 3 others. So it's 6/6 trample for 4 mana, which is pretty good. And it says when it comes into play, any player may sacrifice a land to put the Argothian Worm on top of its owner's library. So this is pretty good because you're getting a 6/6 trample for 4 mana, but you're not getting 1, you're getting 2. So when they both enter, any player may sacrifice a land to put that card back on top of its owner's library. So they can keep sacrificing lands, but they're not going to get anywhere if they keep doing that. So having 2 of these enter for 4 mana for 2 6/6 tramples, I think is a very good place to start for the Worms. And if they want to sacrifice their lands, they can by all means do that, but they're putting the Worms still back on top of the library, so it's going to come out again, and there's going to be 2 of them coming at you again because of Volo. So it's not within their best interest in this deck to put the Worm back on top of the library, because it's going to be worse for them in the long run. So yeah. Next we have Pelaka Worm. So this is just a lot of value really. So this is a 7/7 trample. When it enters, you gain 7 life, and when it dies, you draw a card. So yeah, you know, you get 2 of these enter, you're going to gain 14 life, and then when they both die, you're going to draw a card, so they replace themselves, and they're a big 7/7 trampling beater. So again, just worth a mention if you do want to just use your worm include as a big beater. Next we have a Penumbra Worm. So this is another good one. So we've got Penumbra Worm. This is a 6/6 trample. And it says when it dies, you get a 6/6 black worm with trample. So it replaces itself. So you basically get 4 creatures out of this over their life cycle, unless they choose to exile them. So yeah, you get 2 of these from Volo. When they die, you basically get the same creature back, which I think is very, very good. So yeah, if you want sort of more of a constant threat, Penumbra Worm would be your go-to worm there. You've got Symbiotic Worm. So this would be your worm if you want to go to as a creating tokens effect. So Symbiotic Worm, green, 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 and 5. And when it dies, you put 7/1/1 green insects creature tokens onto the battlefield. It's a 7/7. So yeah, when it dies, you know, you're going to get 2 of these as a result of Volo. So when they both die, you're going to get 14 green, 14 1/1s. So you haven't actually effectively lost the power on board. It's just spread over, you know, more bodies, which could also be quite a good thing for you. So Symbiotic Worm would be your token generator in the worm section. And then we have another ridiculous card, which is World Spine Worm, which is absolutely outrageous. So yeah, creating 2 of these would just be ridiculous. So green, 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 and 8 for a 15/15 trample, and when the World Spine Worm dies, you get 3/3 5/5 green worm creature tokens with trample. So again, the power never goes away, but when the World Spine Worm is put into a graveyard from anywhere, shuffle it into its owner's library, so you never really get rid of the worm, which I think is very, very good. So I think, you know, the World Spine Worm is probably the best one in there. It is the most mana intensive, but it is a mana intensive deck anyway. I think the only spells that will be in this deck will be the ramp spells, for just getting out loads and loads of lands, and then just casting some ridiculous creatures with Volo. But that is pretty much it. Those are all the sort of monstrous creature types that really, really spoke to me the most. But leave a comment in the section below as to what sort of other creature types I've missed, and what other creatures you would potentially put in here, or what spells you would put in here. But this has been AZZ'S Guide to Monsters for Volo in EDH. Thanks for watching. Please make sure you like and subscribe. Hit a little bell notification for more notifications on Magic the Gathering, Flesh and Blood, TCGs, board games, all the geeky stuff I'm going to be doing. And yeah, we will see you on the next video. Peace!